In the quiet reaches of the galaxy, far from the bustling heart of civilization, there lived a girl who had once been a princess, or so she had been told. She was part of an ancient and powerful alien race, one that stretched across countless worlds and galaxies. Her lineage was noble, her bloodline pure, and yet she was labeled by those same people who once praised her as something she had never been: barren. To those around her, she was the girl who would never bear children, the one destined to be alone forever. Her existence, which was once filled with dreams and ambitions, had slowly withered away into the shadows of rejection. She had seen it in their eyes, the way they looked at her with pity, as though she were broken, incomplete. They had chosen everyone, except her. The other girls of her age, beautiful, strong, and fertile, were chosen as mates for the most powerful of their kind, their futures set in stone with union and love. But not her. No, she was overlooked, left in the corners of their grand halls, forgotten in their moments of grandeur. Each day, she watched from the high palace windows as ships came and went, carrying the chosen ones away to new worlds, to new lives filled with honor and joy. She longed to feel the excitement, the thrill of being seen, of being chosen, but it never came. Instead, she spent her days alone, with only the company of the vast stars above her for solace. The loneliness was crushing. It wrapped around her like a suffocating cloak, a constant reminder that she was not worthy of the love that was freely given to others. She would never have a partner to share her life with, never build a family as they all did. And so, she resigned herself to the life she had been given, a life of solitude and quiet despair. But as she stared at the distant stars one evening, a strange thing happened. A message flashed across her communicator. At first, she thought it was a mistake, some glitch in the system, some false hope. But it wasn't. The message was clear: a human has chosen you. She froze. Her heart raced. Could it be? A human? Why would a human, of all beings in the universe, choose her? What could a human possibly want with someone like her? After all, she was barren, an outcast even in her own world. No one wanted her, not even her own people. Yet here was a human, a species so distant from her own, with a life so different from hers, offering to choose her. The thought was ludicrous. It didn't make sense. She stared at the blinking message, trying to comprehend what it meant. Was it a trap? A joke? Or could it be something more? It was impossible, she thought. No one had ever chosen her. Why would a human do so now? But despite the doubt, something within her stirred. A tiny flicker of hope, buried deep beneath the layers of rejection and pain. Could this be the beginning of something new? Could this human see something in her that no one else had? Or would this, too, be another cruel trick of fate? The girl hesitated. She didn't want to get her hopes up, didn't want to believe in something that could be shattered in an instant. She had already been broken by the cruelty of her own people, by the rejection that had become so familiar. But she couldn't shake the feeling that this was different. There was something in the message, something in the way the human spoke to her, that made her believe it might be real. With a deep breath, she made her decision. She would go. She would travel to meet this human, to see if he truly meant what he said. Even if it was a lie, even if it was a mistake, at least she would know. At least she would have the answer to the question that had haunted her for so long. Why was she never chosen? As the girl boarded her ship and left behind the life she had known, she couldn't help but wonder what awaited her. Would this human be kind, or would he too see her as the barren alien girl, unworthy of love? The stars stretched out before her, an endless sea of possibility. But in the back of her mind, she knew that no matter what happened, she was about to embark on a journey that would change her life forever. The journey to the human planet was long, and the girl found herself alone in the quiet darkness of space, her thoughts swirling like the stars outside her window. Each passing day felt like an eternity, yet the message from the human haunted her, keeping her restless. The human had chosen her. But why? What did he see in her that everyone else overlooked? Was it just a fleeting moment of compassion, or was there something deeper, something more significant behind his decision? She pondered the possibilities, but the more she thought about it, the more questions arose. The human was a stranger to her. She knew little about their kind, except that they were primitive compared to the other species in the galaxy, their technologies not as advanced, their customs strange and unknown. What would a human want with her, the so-called barren princess of an ancient race? Surely they had their own women, their own kind to choose from. Why would a human seek her out? The doubt gnawed at her, and she found herself growing more anxious with each passing moment. The girl had never felt more vulnerable than she did now, traveling across the galaxy toward an unknown fate, following the directions of a stranger. She couldn't deny the small, fragile flicker of hope that had taken root inside her, but it was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the cold realities of the universe. The ship's sensors beeped softly, signaling her arrival in the orbit of the human planet. Her heart skipped a beat as she gazed out at the lush, green world below. It was beautiful, vibrant, and filled with life. She had never seen anything like it before. The planet seemed so different from her own, a place untouched by the cold indifference of her species. Perhaps this human was right. Perhaps this was where she could find something she had lost long ago: belonging. As the ship descended, her excitement mixed with a deep sense of apprehension. What would she find when she arrived? What would this human look like? Would he truly be the one who had chosen her, or had this been a mistake from the start? Her mind raced with 1,000 possibilities, each one more terrifying than the last. But there was no turning back now. She had made the decision to come, and she would face whatever awaited her, no matter how uncertain it was. The ship touched down with a soft thud, and the girl felt her pulse quicken. She took a deep breath, steadying herself before the doors of the craft slowly opened. The air outside was warm and thick with the scent of the earth. The sky above was painted with hues of red and gold, a breathtaking sight she had never known. But she barely noticed the beauty of the world around her. Her attention was focused entirely on the human who stood waiting for her. There he was, standing alone on the platform as the ship's door opened. He was tall, with dark, expressive eyes that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 untold stories. His features were sharp, yet kind, and there was a quiet strength in the way he held himself. His clothes were simple but functional, nothing extravagant, just a plain suit of fabric that looked well worn. Despite his seemingly unremarkable appearance, there was something about him that drew her in, something that made her heart flutter in a way she had never felt before. She hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach him, but then, as if sensing her doubt, he stepped forward with a gentle smile. "Welcome," he said, his voice calm and steady, yet carrying a warmth that reached deep into her chest. "I'm glad you came." The girl felt a strange sensation in her chest at the sound of his voice, something she hadn't felt in so long. Comfort. She swallowed hard, fighting the emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. She had spent so many years learning to hide her pain, to lock it away behind walls of indifference. But now, in his presence, it felt as if those walls were crumbling. You really chose me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The words felt strange coming from her mouth, as if they didn't belong to her. She was asking for reassurance, seeking validation, but even as she said them, she wasn't sure if she was ready to hear the answer. He nodded, his eyes never leaving hers. "Yes," he said simply. "I chose you because I see you. I see the strength in you, even when you don't see it in yourself." His words caught her off guard, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She had expected something else, something more. But this human, this stranger, spoke with such certainty, such honesty, that it left her speechless. How could he see strength in someone who had been told time and time again that she was weak, that she was barren? How could he possibly understand the weight of the rejection she had carried for so long? But then, as she stood there before him, something shifted inside her. She wasn't sure if it was his presence, his words, or something else entirely, but for the first time in her life, she felt seen. She felt understood. And for a brief moment, she allowed herself to believe, to hope that maybe, just maybe, this human was exactly what she needed. But there was one question that still gnawed at her, one that she couldn't ignore. Why me? Before she could voice her thoughts, the human extended his hand toward her. Come, he said softly. There's so much I want to show you. The girl stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment, uncertain of what to do. She had been so alone for so long, and now, here was a human who wanted to help her, to understand her, to choose her. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself? Finally, with a deep breath, she placed her hand in his. And in that moment, as their hands met, she felt something spark between them. A connection that felt as real as the very air she breathed. The uncertainty, the fear, the doubt, all of it seemed to fade away, replaced by a new sense of hope. Perhaps this was the beginning of something far greater than she could ever have imagined. Together, they walked into the unknown, side by side, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The days following her arrival on the human planet passed by in a haze of unfamiliar sights and emotions. The girl, once a princess of an ancient and noble race, now found herself living among humans, in a world far from the alien halls and grand palaces she had known. The contrast was stark. This planet was a place of raw, untamed beauty, and its people were nothing like the ones she had been surrounded by in her own world. They were simple, yes, but their simplicity held a kind of charm she had never expected. The human who had chosen her, his name was Cal, had been kind to her, more so than anyone else ever had. He guided her through the streets of his city, showing her the little things. The bustling markets where people exchanged goods and stories, the parks where children played under the wide open sky, and the small homes with their humble, warm interiors. Everything was so different, so earthy and alive. It was a world full of emotion and connection, where no one was judged for being who they were. She could see it in their faces, the joy they found in each other's company, the sense of community that filled the air. The girl, however, still felt out of place. Despite Cal's insistence that she was meant to be here, that this was where she belonged, she couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. The humans treated her with kindness, yes, but there was a part of her that couldn't fully let go of the hurt and rejection that had been ingrained in her for so long. How could she belong here when her own people had cast her aside? How could she accept their warmth when it had been so foreign to her for so many years? It wasn't just the people who made her feel like an alien here. It was her own sense of inadequacy. The humans saw her as something special, but how could she be when she had spent her entire life believing that she was broken, that she would never be enough? She wasn't like the other women, those who were fertile and chosen by the strongest and most powerful among her race. She was different. She was barren. She was alone. But Cale, in his quiet way, kept trying to convince her otherwise. Every time she pulled away, every time she recoiled at the attention or the kindness, he was there to gently remind her that she was more than what she believed herself to be. His touch was comforting, steady, like the ground beneath her feet, and his words, though simple, carried a weight that settled in her heart. He didn't speak of grand promises or lofty ideals. Instead, he simply offered her his companionship and his acceptance. He wanted nothing more than for her to see herself the way he saw her, worthy, beautiful, and capable of love. But even as Cal's words began to chip away at the walls she had built around herself, the girl couldn't shake the unease that lingered in the pit of her stomach. She had been abandoned by everyone she had ever known, and even though Cal's kindness was genuine, there was still a nagging doubt. Why had he chosen her? What had he seen in her that made her worthy of his attention? Was it simply pity? Or was there something more? The fear of being a burden, of being someone he could never truly care for, gnawed at her every time their eyes met. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft orange glow over the city, Cale took her to a quiet spot by a serene lake. The water shimmered in the fading light, its surface smooth and undisturbed. The world around them seemed to fall away, leaving only the two of them in the stillness of the moment. Cale sat down on the grass beside her, and for a long while, they simply stared out at the water in silence. "Why did you choose me?" the girl finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She had been carrying the question in her heart since the moment she had received his message, but now, in the quiet of the evening, it felt like the right time to ask. Cale turned to her, his gaze soft and steady. "Because you're worth it," he said, his voice calm but filled with sincerity. "Because despite everything you've been through, you still have the strength to love. You just haven't seen it in yourself yet." She looked at him, her brow furrowing in confusion. "But I'm not like the others," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I don't have what they have. I'm barren. No one wants me." Cale reached out and gently cupped her cheek, his thumb brushing against her skin in a reassuring motion. "You're not broken," he said. "You're not what others have told you. You're not barren. You're whole. You just need to believe that." The girl closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, allowing the warmth of his hand to wash over her. She had spent so long believing the lies her people had told her, the lies she had come to accept as truth. But Cale's words were like a balm to her wounded heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt like maybe, just maybe, she could believe in something else. Maybe she could believe in him. Maybe she could believe in herself. "I want to believe you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "But I'm scared." "I know," Cale said softly. "But I'm here, and I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone anymore." For the first time since she had arrived, the girl felt a shift within her. The doubt that had held her captive for so long seemed to loosen its grip, if only just a little. The uncertainty that had clouded her every thought began to fade, replaced by the warmth of Cale's words and the quiet promise of something more. She still had a long way to go, she knew that, but in this moment she was no longer just the forgotten princess. She was something else, something new, something that Cale believed in. And as they sat there, together in the fading light, the girl realized that maybe, just maybe, this human was right. Maybe she wasn't barren. Maybe she was capable of something more than she had ever imagined. And perhaps in time, she would learn to accept the love he was offering her, to accept the love she had always deserved. Days blurred into weeks as the girl's time on the human planet continued, and with every passing moment, the connection between her and Cale deepened. She had learned to adapt to the rhythms of this world, though she still felt the quiet pang of being an outsider. Despite the kindness that surrounded her, despite the simplicity of the human life that Cale had shown her, she couldn't quite shake the sense that she didn't belong. The vastness of space, her alien heritage, and the painful scars of rejection were always in the back of her mind, like shadows that refused to be cast aside. Still, there were moments, small, fleeting moments, when she allowed herself to forget the weight of her past and simply enjoy the present. These were the moments she treasured, the ones that made her feel something she hadn't known for so long. Peace. Cale had never pushed her, never rushed her to feel anything she wasn't ready to. His patience was infinite, his kindness a steady, unbroken stream that calmed the storm inside her. He never demanded anything from her but her presence, and that in itself was a gift she had not known she needed. He never mentioned the reasons why he had chosen her, never pressed for answers to the questions that danced in her mind. He let her come to him in her own time, and that more than anything made her feel safe. But the deeper they grew, the harder it became to ignore the nagging voice in the back of her mind. Why had he chosen her? She couldn't escape the thought. No matter how much she wanted to believe that he saw something in her, something beyond the barren princess she had been branded as, she couldn't stop doubting. She could feel his warmth, his gentleness, but still there was a question that lingered in her heart. Was this real? It wasn't until one fateful evening, when they found themselves in the quiet of the forest beyond the city, that the truth was revealed, though neither of them knew just how deeply it would change everything. Kale had taken her on a walk through the woods, a place that had quickly become a refuge for her. The towering trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves rustling softly in the wind, filling the air with the earthy scent of life and growth. Here, away from the hum of technology and the bustling city, she felt something akin to belonging. The simple serenity of the forest mirrored her growing feelings for Kale. As they walked in silence, the weight of her thoughts seemed to lift, as if the trees themselves were whispering peace into her soul. The girl glanced at Kale from the corner of her eye, watching the way the sunlight filtered through the branches and illuminated his features. He was looking ahead, his expression unreadable, his movements fluid and calm. She had become accustomed to his quiet strength, to the way he held himself without the arrogance or pride that she had seen in the leaders of her own world. "Kale," she said softly, breaking the silence, her voice betraying the uncertainty that had been building within her. He turned toward her, his eyes soft, inviting her to speak her mind. "What is it?" he asked, his tone warm and patient. The girl hesitated, the words tangled in her throat, but she knew she could not keep them inside any longer. "Why me?" she asked finally, the question that had been eating at her for so long. "Why did you choose me? I'm not like the others. I'm broken, and I don't understand. I don't understand why you would want someone like me." Cal's expression shifted, his eyes narrowing, as if he had been waiting for this question all along. He stepped closer to her, his gaze intense, but not unkind. "You think you're broken?" he asked, his voice gentle but firm. The girl nodded, her heart heavy. "Yes. I'm barren. I'm alone. I've always been the one left behind." Cal's lips curved into a small, almost sad smile. He reached out and cupped her face in his hands, his touch tender, his gaze never leaving hers. "You're not broken," he said simply, his voice filled with conviction. "You were never broken. You just had to believe it. I've seen you, all of you. Not just the parts you've shown the world, but the parts that no one else has cared to see. You're stronger than you realize, and that's why I chose you." The girl's breath caught in her throat, her pulse quickening at his words. She had never heard anyone speak to her like that. No one had ever seen her for who she truly was, not in the way Cal did. He didn't see her as a broken thing, as the barren alien princess who had been cast aside. He saw something more in her, something that she had never been able to see in herself. "Why?" she whispered, still struggling to understand. "Why did you see that in me? I don't understand why I'm worthy of your choice." Cale took a deep breath, his hand still resting gently on her face, his eyes soft but serious. "Because you're not just an alien princess," he said. "You're a person, and sometimes it takes someone to remind you of that. The fact that you've been through so much, that you've survived your pain, that's what makes you strong. You're not defined by what others think of you. You're defined by what you choose to be." The girl felt a lump form in her throat as the weight of his words settled over her. She had spent so long hiding, so long thinking of herself as a burden, as someone who would never be good enough. But Cal's words, simple yet profound, pierced through the darkness that had consumed her for so long. "Cal," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I don't know how to believe in myself the way you believe in me. I don't know how to let go of the past, of the pain that's followed me all my life." He smiled gently, his hand sliding down to hold her shoulders, grounding her in his presence. "You don't have to do it alone. You don't have to fix everything right away. But I'll be here, every step of the way." In that moment, the girl realized something she hadn't allowed herself to understand before. She wasn't alone. Cal's belief in her wasn't just a fleeting gesture. It was a foundation. It was a truth that she had never known, a promise that she didn't have to carry her burdens alone anymore. She could let go of the weight she had carried for so long, and perhaps in time, learn to believe in herself. The future was still uncertain, filled with shadows of doubt and fear, but for the first time, the girl allowed herself to hope. Because for the first time, she believed that maybe, just maybe, She was worthy of that hope. The days grew warmer as the girl's bond with Kel deepened. With each passing moment, she found herself more at ease in his presence, and the overwhelming weight of doubt that had once consumed her began to lift. There were moments when she could almost believe she was the person Kel saw, a person worthy of love, of respect, of belonging. But just as she began to let herself believe it, the shadows of her past reared their ugly heads, reminding her of the girl she had once been, the one who had been left behind by her people, the one who had never been chosen. She had come to Kel with so much hope, so much uncertainty, but with every smile he gave her, every gentle touch, she had dared to believe. She had allowed herself to trust in his sincerity, in the way he saw her not as a mistake, but as someone worth saving. She had allowed herself to feel the warmth of his affection, the safety of his presence, and yet that safety was fleeting, like a fragile bubble that could burst at any moment. The girl, though she tried, couldn't quite let go of the fear that had been instilled in her for so long, the fear that one day the kindness would fade, that the love she was beginning to accept would be nothing more than a fleeting moment in the vast emptiness of the universe. But that fear, that gnawing uncertainty, would soon be drowned out by something much darker, something neither she nor Kel could have anticipated. It began with a shift in the atmosphere, subtle at first, like a whisper on the wind. The girl noticed it when she woke up one morning to find Kel's expression harder than usual, his eyes distant, his movements purposeful. He had always been calm, but now there was an edge to him, a sense of urgency that made the girl's stomach twist with anxiety. She watched him from a distance as he hurriedly packed a bag, gathering supplies in the same way a warrior would prepare for battle. "Kel," she called out, her voice laced with concern. "What's going on?" He turned to her, his face tight, his brow furrowed. "There's something I need to do. Something important," he said, his voice low. "I'll explain everything later. Just stay here, please. I'll be back soon." She wanted to argue, to ask him what was going on, but there was a finality in his tone, a warning that told her not to press him further. So she did what he asked, though her mind raced with questions. What was he keeping from her? What was so urgent that he couldn't even explain it to her? The hours stretched into a long, empty silence as she waited in their small home. The walls felt too close, the air too still. She paced, unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The forest, once a sanctuary, now seemed distant, its beauty masking a hidden danger she could no longer ignore. Her heart beat faster with every passing minute. Kel had been gone longer than he said he would be, and the girl's anxiety had transformed into something darker. Something deep in her gut told her that whatever he was dealing with, it was not something she could ignore. Finally, as the sun began to set, she could stand it no longer. She grabbed a cloak and set out in search of Kel, her steps hurried and uneven. The streets were quieter than usual, the evening air thick with an unspoken tension. She kept walking, faster now, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached the edge of the city where the trees began, and that's when she saw it. A figure standing in the shadows, a figure that wasn't quite human. She froze. The figure was tall, dressed in dark, flowing robes, and their face was obscured by a hood. The girl's instincts screamed at her to turn around, to retreat into the safety of the city, but something held her in place. She didn't know what this figure was, but it was clearly not of the human world. The figure turned slowly toward her, and the air seemed to grow colder. "You must be the one they call the Barren Princess," the figure said, its voice smooth, like silk, but filled with an unsettling malice. The girl's breath caught in her throat. She could feel her pulse quicken as the weight of the words settled over her. She didn't know who this figure was or how they knew about her, but the way they spoke, the tone of disdain in their voice, sent a chill down her spine. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. "What do you want?" The figure stepped closer, and for the first time, the girl felt truly afraid. The words that came next would change everything. "I am not here for you," the figure said, its voice growing colder still. "I am here for him." The girl's heart skipped a beat. "Him," she repeated, barely able to speak. "Who are you talking about?" The figure's eyes gleamed beneath the hood, and for a split second, she saw something terrifying. A glint of red, like the eyes of a predator. "The human you call Kel," the figure said with a smirk. "He is not what he seems. He has deceived you, and now the time has come for him to pay for his lies." Before the girl could react, before she could even comprehend the weight of what the figure had said, the world around her shifted. The trees around her seemed to come alive, their branches twisting and writhing like serpents. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and in the distance she heard the unmistakable sound of a ship landing. Kel's ship. Her heart lurched, and she turned toward the sound, hoping against hope that this was all some horrible misunderstanding. But then the figure spoke again, and her world shattered. "Kel isn't the man you think he is. He's here for a reason. And that reason is you." The girl's mind reeled, and as the figure's words echoed in her head, she realized just how little she truly knew about the human she had allowed herself to trust. The past, the darkness that had always surrounded her, was coming back, but now it wasn't just her own demons she had to face. It was Kel's too. Everything she had believed was now in question. The life she had started to build, the future she had dared to imagine. Was it all just another lie? Was Kel truly the man he appeared to be, or was he just another shadow in the darkness of the universe? The girl stood there, trembling, her thoughts racing as the world she had begun to trust slipped away from her grasp. The journey she had embarked on with Kel was far from over, but now it had taken a dangerous turn, and she would need to face whatever came next with the strength she had only just begun to discover within herself. The girl's mind was in turmoil as she stood frozen, staring at the figure cloaked in shadows. The words it had spoken rang in her ears, each one a hammer striking her heart. Kel wasn't the person she had believed him to be. He had deceived her, used her for a purpose she didn't understand. She had let her guard down, allowed herself to hope, to trust. And now, everything she had built, the fragile foundation of love, of belonging, was crumbling around her. She felt a deep ache in her chest, a sorrow that threatened to swallow her whole. The life she had begun to imagine, the future she had allowed herself to dream of, now seemed impossible, a cruel mirage fading into the distance. But before she could process the gravity of what the figure had told her, the sound of approaching footsteps broke through her haze. Her heart skipped a beat. It was Kel. She turned toward the sound, her legs weak beneath her, as though her very soul were being torn in two. The moment she saw him, standing at the edge of the clearing, she felt both relief and terror collide in her chest. He was here. He had returned. Kel's eyes locked onto hers, and for a fleeting moment, everything seemed normal. He looked the same as he always had, calm, steady, his gaze filled with warmth and affection. But something was different now. The ease in his posture, the softness in his expression. It all seemed like an act, a carefully crafted illusion designed to hide the truth that she wasn't sure she was ready to face. "Kel," she said, her voice breaking through the quiet of the forest, barely more than a whisper. She wanted to run to him, to find comfort in his arms, but she couldn't. The figure's words haunted her. "He's here for a reason. And that reason is you." Kel's gaze flickered to the cloaked figure, and for a brief moment, a flicker of tension crossed his features. It was so quick, so fleeting, that the girl wasn't sure if she had imagined it. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, his usual calm returned. He smiled at her, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said, his voice warm, but there was an edge to it, something forced. The girl took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. "Kel," she whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of everything she had learned. "What is going on? What is this? Why is this person saying all these things?" Cal's expression faltered for a moment, and the girl saw a flicker of something. Regret, maybe, or fear. But just as quickly, it was gone, replaced by the same reassuring mask he had worn since she arrived. He stepped forward, but the girl held up a hand, stopping him in his tracks. "Tell me the truth," she demanded, her voice growing stronger despite the trembling fear that gripped her. "Tell me who you really are." Cal's eyes widened for the briefest moment, and then, as if he had made up his mind, his shoulders slumped slightly. "I never meant to hurt you," he began, his voice softer now, almost apologetic. "But there are things I haven't told you, things you need to understand." The girl's breath hitched. "What things?" she asked, her pulse racing. "What do I need to understand, Cal? I trusted you." He exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair, clearly struggling with the weight of whatever he was about to reveal. "I didn't choose you by accident," he said, his words slow, deliberate. "The truth is, I didn't just pick you because I saw something in you. I picked you because you're part of something bigger, a plan that goes beyond us, beyond this world." The girl's heart sank. The words felt like ice, freezing her from the inside out. "A plan," she repeated, her voice barely audible. "What plan?" Cal hesitated, glancing at the cloaked figure, as though seeking permission. The figure gave a slight nod, and Cal turned back to her, his eyes full of sorrow. "You were chosen long before we met. Your lineage, your bloodline. It's tied to something ancient, something powerful. You are the key to something that could change the entire galaxy." The girl's mind spun as Cal's words hit her like a tidal wave. She had always known she was different, but this was something beyond her understanding. She had always felt like an outcast, rejected by her people, abandoned by the ones who were supposed to protect her. But now, Cal was telling her that she wasn't just some forgotten alien princess. She was part of something larger, something that had been planned for her long before she was ever born. "Why didn't you tell me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of betrayal and confusion. "Why keep this from me?" Cal's face twisted in pain. "I didn't want to involve you in this," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought I could protect you from it. I thought I could keep you safe. But it's too late now. The truth is out, and we can't go back." The girl took a step back, her mind reeling. The weight of his words was too much to bear. She felt a sudden wave of nausea wash over her, the room spinning as if the very earth beneath her feet were crumbling away. She had come here hoping to find something real, something pure, but now everything felt tainted. The life she had wanted with Cal, the hope she had nurtured, was crumbling, shattered beyond repair. And then the cloaked figure stepped forward, its voice cold and filled with malice. "You see, girl," it said, its words dripping with disdain, "you were never truly meant to be with him. He's here to use you, just like the rest of us. You are nothing more than a pawn in a much larger game." The girl's eyes flashed with defiance. She refused to let this figure, or anyone, tell her what she was. "No," she said firmly, her voice unwavering. "I'm not a pawn. I'm not anyone's tool." Cal's gaze hardened, and the girl felt a pang of betrayal in her chest as he turned his attention back to the cloaked figure. He didn't say a word, but the message was clear. Whatever his true intentions were, they were aligned with this figure's plans. She took another step back, her mind racing. She didn't know what Cal's true role in this grand plan was, but one thing was certain. The future she had imagined was no longer within reach. The trust she had given him, the love she had started to feel, everything was a lie, twisted and manipulated by forces beyond her comprehension. As the girl stood there, heartbroken and lost, she realized that the journey she had started had only just begun. The truth had been uncovered, but it was only the first step in a much darker path. And now she had to decide. Would she continue to follow the man who had shattered her trust, or would she find a way to take control of her own destiny, no matter the cost? The girl stood at the edge of the clearing, her body trembling with a mix of disbelief and anger. The world around her had shifted so violently, so completely, that she felt as if she were no longer the person she had been just hours ago. Everything she had believed in, everything she had come to trust, now seemed like a cruel illusion. Cale, the human who had shown her kindness, who had made her feel seen and valued for the first time in her life, was not who he appeared to be. And the figure in the shadows, the one who had called her a pawn, had shattered her last vestiges of hope. She wanted to scream, to cry out in fury at the universe for bringing her this far only to let her fall so terribly short of happiness. But even as the rage surged inside her, there was something else, a spark of defiance, a small but fierce flicker of the girl she once was, the girl who had survived rejection and abandonment, who had fought to stay alive when everything seemed hopeless. Cale stood before her, his eyes pleading, his expression tormented. He had been caught in this web of deception just as much as she had, but that didn't excuse the lies, the secrets, the manipulation. He had known the truth from the beginning, and yet he had allowed her to believe in something that wasn't real. And now here she was, on the brink of losing everything, of losing herself in a world that seemed designed to tear her apart. "I never wanted this to happen," Cale said, his voice breaking through the thick silence. "I didn't want you to get involved in this, but I had no choice. The prophecy, it's too important. It's bigger than both of us." The girl took a deep breath, steadying herself against the tidal wave of emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "I don't care about your prophecy," she said, her voice cold and hard. "I care about the truth. I care about what's real. And this," she gestured between them, her heart aching. "This isn't real. It never was." Cal's eyes flared with pain at her words, but he didn't argue. He didn't try to explain. It was as though he knew, deep down, that there was no explanation that could undo the damage. The lies had already been laid bare, and now there was only the raw, jagged truth that could not be hidden anymore. The cloaked figure stepped forward, its presence looming like a dark cloud over them both. "You still don't understand," it said, its voice dripping with disdain. "You were never meant to be with him. You were never meant to be a part of his world. You were always just a tool in a much larger game. The sooner you accept that, the better." The girl's stomach twisted with disgust at the figure's words, but she refused to let it dictate her fate. She had been used, manipulated, lied to, but she would not be anyone's pawn. Not anymore. She had fought too hard to survive the way her people had cast her aside, and she wasn't about to let anyone, human or alien, take away the little bit of control she had over her own destiny. "I'm not your tool," she spat, her voice strong despite the tremor of fear that ran through her. "And I'm not his either." Cal's gaze softened for a moment, and he took a step toward her. "You don't understand," he said, his voice filled with regret. "I never meant to hurt you. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now that I was wrong. I never wanted to pull you into this." But the girl didn't step forward. She didn't reach for him. The distance between them wasn't just physical. It was something far deeper now, a chasm carved by lies, by betrayal. "You lied to me, Cale," she said quietly, her voice steady but heavy with pain. "You used me. You chose me because of some prophecy, not because of who I am. And now you want me to believe you, to trust you." Cal's face tightened, and she saw the guilt and shame flicker in his eyes. "I never wanted to hurt you," he repeated, but his words were hollow now, empty of the warmth they had once held. "But you're part of something bigger than you realize. The prophecy was always going to catch up with us. You were never meant to escape it." The girl shook her head slowly, her mind racing, but there was clarity now, where there had once been confusion. She had spent too many years feeling lost, feeling discarded, but she was not lost anymore. She had a purpose, and it was not bound to the whims of anyone else's prophecy. It was her own, her life, her choice. "Then maybe I'll make my own prophecy," she said, her voice unwavering. "I don't need you to decide my fate. I don't need anyone to tell me who I'm supposed to be." The cloaked figure sneered, its hands flicking out toward her, as though to dismiss her defiance. "You're foolish. You think you can fight destiny." But the girl didn't flinch. She had spent too long hiding, too long doubting her worth. The truth she had been seeking was within her all along, buried deep beneath the weight of other people's expectations. She had the power to choose her path, to carve her future with her own hands. "I'm not afraid of destiny," she said, each word like a declaration of independence. "And I'm not afraid of you." For a moment, there was silence, a heavy, oppressive pause that seemed to hang between them all. Then, the figure's lips twisted into a smile, sharp and cold. "You may think you have control now, but the game is far from over. You'll see. One day, you'll realize that you were always meant to be a part of this. You can't escape the forces that guide the universe." The girl stood her ground, but she could feel the weight of the figure's words pressing against her, as though trying to force her back into submission. She didn't know what would come next, didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she knew she didn't have to face it alone. She had Kel, despite everything, and the bond between them, though broken, was not beyond repair. She could still choose the life she wanted, still shape the future into something that was hers and hers alone. "I don't need to escape anything," she said, her voice fierce. "I'm going to build my own path, and I'll do it with or without you." With those words, she turned and walked away from the figure, from Cale, from the world that had tried to use her. Her heart still ached, still carried the scars of the past, but she wasn't defined by them anymore. She wasn't defined by anyone's prophecy. She was free. And for the first time in her life, she was ready to choose who she would become.